Introducing our first of 3 speakers this evening. So what we're going to do is we're going to have 3 short presentations of 10 minutes or so, and then 10 minutes each, and then we're going to move into breakout room discussions where you can connect with each other before going to a Q&A and further interaction. But our first speaker to kick us off this evening is Claire Thompson. So Claire is the author of Mindfulness in the Natural World and the Art of Mindful Birdwatching. And she's also the founder of Mindfulness of Nature. So through Mindfulness of Nature, she leads group workshops and retreats and also one-to-one wellbeing consultations. And Claire's also a qualified NHS psychological wellbeing practitioner and has 10 years of experience in nature conservation for Wildlands Trust and BirdLife International. So you can see that Claire is really at this intersection of kind of caring for our mental well-being and caring for the natural world and what it means to bring those together. So really looking forward to hearing Claire's sharing this evening. Over to you, Claire.
Great, thanks a lot. Thank you very much, Flo, and thanks for having me as part of this event. And yeah, nice to see so many of you here as well. So Flo's introduced me, so I won't go into that again, but my name's Claire. And I just wanted to say a little bit about my personal journey into mindfulness and nature connection, and offer a few thoughts as to why I feel it's so important, and what we may be able to do to connect with nature more mindfully in our day-to-day lives. So to start off, I thought I'd tell you a bit about my journey. So throughout my life, I've always had a tendency to be quite sort of head focused, or at least when I was younger, I tended to sort of be quite a bit of a thinker, which was a blessing and also a curse at times, as I'm sure some of you will be able to relate to. And when I was a teenager, weirdly, it wasn't so much through the sort of playful route that I came into nature connection initially. It was more kind of a meaning seeking. So I spent quite a lot of time when I was a teenager trying to work out, you know, what life was about, and just try to find meaning in life. And I did this initially by sort of turning things around and around in my mind in order to make sense of it all. But at times I felt really disconnected from myself and from other people. And I never really found any answers by sort of trying to work it out in my head and trying to think through things in that way. And then in this quest for meaning, then I started to think, well, if you want to know about life, then the best place to look would be into life itself, which for me is basically the natural world, which sort of gives us all life. And I guess I felt like nature was the only thing at the time that I could really trust. It was something that was real. It was something that I could depend on for sort of finding some kind of truth or some kind of sense to my experience. So then in my late teenage years, I went to South America, to the Chilean Lake District, and I went to volunteer on some nature conservation projects out there. And it was actually whilst I was out there, it was probably the first time that I'd experienced sort of such pure wilderness. So it's a lot of untouched wilderness out there in that region. And for the first time in a long time, I had quite a few moments where I just felt really present with my experience. And I felt very connected. I felt a sense of belonging there. And it was just these sort of moments of quiet in these amazing landscapes of monkey puzzle tree forests, which are from the Jurassic era, sort of lakes, volcanoes, waterfalls, amazing bird life, amazing other wildlife, mammals. And I just felt really grounded. I felt really at home, and I felt sort of free to be myself. And I felt like I wasn't judged. And I just felt part of something a lot greater than myself. And I found kind of like a sense of relief in that as well. And in those moments, I just felt allowed to be just as I was. And it was probably one of the first times that I felt like I was enough just as I was, and I didn't need to work any more out than that at that time. So then I started to reflect on why did I feel like this in these places? And actually it seemed kind of obvious because we are nature. And And so there's no wonder that we feel that sense of belonging and connection when we're in touch with the rest of the natural world. So, you know, we're made of the same stuff as nature. So our bodies evolved in nature, our senses evolved in nature, our minds evolved in nature. You know, we have an innate bond with the natural world. And so it was no wonder that when I was in nature or in touch with the rest of nature, then just everything just seemed to make sense. A bit like sort of putting a fish back into water. It just seemed to work for me. And so for me, it's this disconnection that we have nowadays that's sort of been a growing disconnection over time. Disconnection comes from the evolution of conscious thought. So as people, we have the ability to have sort of abstract thoughts related to our experience. So we've been able to create this artificial separation between us and the rest of the natural world. But the problem is that the fact that we're separate from nature is obviously not in tune with the reality of the world, which is that we live in an interconnected world and we're integrally part of nature. And the problem is that living out of tune with the rest of the natural world, so that's within ourselves. So like I said, if we are nature, then it's living out of tune with our own bodies and our own minds and our own experience, but also with out of tune with the rest of the natural world, is having really serious consequences for our own well-being, but also for the well-being of the rest of the planet. And so to me, mindfulness is really about coming back to nature. So it's coming back to our felt experience of nature within ourselves. So our felt experience of our bodies and of our emotions, our minds, our thoughts, but also our experience of nature around us. And it's about being curious and sort of regaining a trust in our experiences of nature within us and around us. And mindfulness is often described as, you know, sort of being aware of our moment by moment experience. And it's very much about that. And in doing so, changing our relationship to nature within ourselves and around us from one of separation to one of connection. So yeah, for me, mindfulness is all about coming back to nature in the very broad sense of the word nature. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that being in touch with nature supports what we call mindfulness. So when we are in nature, naturally we feel more mindful within ourselves. This is partly because of this innate bond that we have with the natural world. And when we're out in nature, then there's a natural stimulation of our senses. So our senses kind of effortlessly take us out of our minds and into our body when we're in touch with the rest of nature. And you might have experienced this just from, you know, if you go for a long walk in nature, a long hike, after a couple of hours walking or sometimes less, you know, you'll start to notice that your mind starts to settle, and you start to feel sort of more embodied. You start to have a little bit more clarity about some of the stuff that you're experiencing. And that's even without any practice often of, you know, sort of conscious practice of being mindful. It just happens when we're in nature that things tend to settle, our minds tend to settle, and we tend to feel sort of more connected, more alive, more grounded. Also, animals and plants, so the rest of the natural world that we share the planet with, they need to be fully present to survive. Sorry. So they have to be 100% connected to their direct moment by moment experience in order to survive in the world, in order to avoid predators, in order to find resources. And because nature is by definition so present, then when we spend time in nature, then it kind of brings that out in ourselves. But also the rest of nature responds to our own lack of mindfulness. So I don't know if you've noticed, but sometimes if you're walking in wild landscapes, in local parks, local woodlands, you know, the wildlife can sense when we are not fully present with our experience. And it's mostly anecdotal evidence. But if we walk through natural landscapes, lost in the mind or in a goal-orientated way or feeling quite agitated and stressed, then the wildlife will somehow pick up on that. And actually being present in nature with our senses and being more mindful whilst we are in nature is actually a way to have more intimate encounters with wildlife as well. You may have come across somebody called John Young, who wrote a book called What the Robin Knows, and he talks quite a lot more about that if you wanted to read more, specifically in relation to bird language and bird watching, and how our attitude when we move through the natural world or spend time with the natural world really matters in terms of how nature will respond to us and how intimate we might be able to get with other wildlife.
We've got about 1 minute to go, just to let you know.
Around about a minute left. So being mindful in nature for me is really about connecting with our felt direct experiences of the natural world within us and outside. But it's very much about some other things that I think we're going to talk about, or other speakers will refer to, in terms of sort of play, in terms of beauty, in terms of appreciation, creativity. So for me, it's very much about experiencing nature more with the heart than with the mind, perhaps. Both are equally valid, but perhaps we're sort of shifting more into experiencing nature more with the heart to sort of rebalance some of that mind-focused stuff that we tend to focus on a lot of the time. And any activities that will put you in touch with your direct experience of nature could be, in my opinion, could be considered mindful. So, you know, whether you enjoy hiking, running, you know, surfing, bird watching, it doesn't really matter. It's just anything that will bring you into that felt experience of the natural world. And just to finish, so why is mindfulness and nature connection so important for us and for the world today? The main thing overall for me is that I feel like we've really lost our capacity, or lost touch with our capacity to listen and pay attention to our natural experience, and then respond to it. So this occurs in the context of well-being. So, you know, even if we just think about this current time with the coronavirus and the lockdown, a lot of people have been feeling quite burnt out. It's kind of listening to that experience and thinking, trusting it, and thinking, what do I need to do? How do I respond to this? And that requires paying attention. But it's the same with bigger environmental issues. So if we just take climate change, for example, you know, it's about paying attention to the fact that, you know, the planet is warming up, it's having consequences, and trusting what our experience of that is to then choose to respond. So I think that reconnection with ourselves, with others, and with the rest of nature is really important for sort of wiser action, whether it's to take care of our own well-being, the well-being of others, and the well-being of the rest of the natural world. And perhaps I'll leave it there for now. I think I've gone over a little bit, but yeah, there'll be time for questions later. So thanks, Flo.
Thank you so much, Claire. That's really, really powerful to hear your journey, and also to hear the insights that you've gained from that journey. And I see that we've got some fans of yours in the chat box already saying they've enjoyed reading your books and attending your sessions. So just to let people know, first of all, we will send follow-up information after this event with details of all the speakers' work. And second of all, if you've got questions for Claire this evening, then please do put them in the chat box ideally with a capital Q or a capital question at the start, so that our team can pick out the questions. Then when we come to the Q&A later on this evening, we will be able to pose your questions to Claire. So thanks, Claire, and we'll be moving on to our next speaker of this evening now. So the next speaker is Sam Kendall. So Sam is the Education Manager at the Eden Project in Cornwall, which many of you may have been to, and Sam's leading Eden's education work with children and young people, which pre-COVID included about 50,000 school visitors a year to Eden. And she's also working on teacher training and school development work for outdoor learning and nature-based play. She's actually a primary school teacher by training, and more recently she's just completed her MSc in Environment and Human Health, and her dissertation was on children's mental health and well-being in the context of school grounds design and redesign projects. So really lovely to have Sam with us this evening to share some of her experience on bringing play and nature together. Over to you, Sam.
Thanks, Flo, and thanks everybody for having me share your Tuesday evening. I'm lucky enough to lead a team that gets to share Eden Project's mission to connect people with the living world and with each other, with hundreds, thousands of children and young people each year. And I just want to share some thoughts on children and young people's nature connection and well-being, kind of grounded in that work. And this idea of nature connection, you know, it seems to be becoming much more commonly spoken about, and it describes kind of in a sort of research context, it's a psychological term, and it describes an individual's sense of their relationship with the natural world, both in terms of the emotional attachment and kind of our beliefs about how we're part of the natural world. Just as Claire was saying, you know, we're many of us believe and understand that we are part of nature, not apart from nature. But what's really interesting about this kind of field of nature connection is what else nature connectedness relates to. So people with higher levels of nature connection show better well-being, both in terms of their kind of how they feel and how they function. And also there's really interesting connections between nature connectedness, positive associations between nature connectedness and our likelihood to engage in pro-environment or pro-conservation behaviours. And in terms of our work with children and young people, that's both for children when they're children, and also kind of there's a long tail of that effect continues into adulthood. So it's really fascinating, important stuff, and I'm really inspired at the moment by the work of the team at Derby University who are working on this, led by Miles Richardson, and they've recently been showing that actually just being in nature isn't enough to do the nature connection thing. Actually, we need to notice nature in order to kind of foster that nature connection and reap those well-being benefits and those pro-environment benefits, which actually I think is really kind of useful if we're thinking about making the benefits of nature accessible, is that actually we don't need to only focus on making sure that people can physically get to nature and to green space, but actually we can work with everybody on noticing the nature just right where they are. And I'm going to share a few pictures with you as I go. And I think this one by the gorilla botanist is a great example of that kind of how do you get people to notice nature wherever they are, and they went around kind of chalking little botanical bits of information to encourage people to spot the beauty wherever they are. Another strand of that work from the Derby team is that the kind of heart connection, emotion, and compassion for nature and a focus on beauty is more powerful than perhaps a more traditional kind of education about nature and learning kind of lists and facts. And again, that's kind of really helpful for those of us who perhaps want to support others in this, is that we don't have to be kind of nature experts or wildlife experts, because actually the job is about helping people kind of engage with the heart and emotion. So yeah, what I want to do is just share a few ideas of kind of how, based in our work at Eden. Now, I'm not a parent. I'm a devoted auntie and an educator of many years, but I hope you find some relevance whatever your kind of context you're bringing today. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was how, in order to notice nature, and particularly for inexpert noticers, which children might be, often we need to narrow the focus. And there's lots of different ways to do that, but it's almost like when you kind of train the attention, then actually you can observe or experience or notice more. So this sunshine bracelet or colour palette in the picture is one of our all-time favourite activities, and it does it beautifully. So this is a fancy one. I'll show you the low-tech version in a minute with double-sided sticky tape. And the task is to go and gather either as many possible colours as possible, or all of the greens you can find, And it works brilliantly. And I did want to demonstrate that this was obviously done in a fancy garden. I did my Blue Peter one on my walk earlier, and I avoided doing it in the swooshy bits of Newquay where I live by the beach, and kind of waited till I was in the back alleys between the housing estate where I live, and I made myself a little beautiful sunshine bracelet. So that's an all-time favorite activity. And it's all about kind of narrowing the focus so you can see more. Maybe it's just a really kind of practical thing. These are our curious eyes. There's a whole kind of video about how to use them on Eden Project's website. Sometimes it's literally kind of letting you see more, see less, by blindfolding you so you can experience differently. And I love the Yellow Girls t-shirts. You can see the communication that's happening, as well as the kind of sensory experience that she's being obliged to undergo. And another way we do that focus narrowing is by kind of using stories and yarns and narratives. So, you know, what we find is that if we ask teenagers to go and look in the rainforest biome at the Eden Project and don't give them some kind of constraining thing, they're done in like 5 minutes. Yeah, there were some plants, miss, it was all right. And actually what you have to do with both children and teenagers is kind of spin them a yarn, give them a reason to be there and go and look, this is my niece, Isla, who spent far longer than either of us might have imagined in the woods, because she had her fairy map with her to find the fairies' house and help them with some modifications and extensions. So again, a different lens to look through of story. And then another way of getting children and young people to notice is by using all of their senses. This again, we didn't invent these activities. These are tried and tested old favorites. Smelly cocktails, potions. All you need is a plastic cup, some stuff to gather, no poo, important rule, and a stick to muddle, and then your water bottle becomes the vessel of the smell releasing potion. So all kinds of ways of engaging with the senses, and also not forgetting that actually being outside, you know, just in the weather is a multi-sensory experience in the way that indoors isn't, and some that lots of our children don't get, and that sometimes getting a bit cold and getting a bit wet or getting a bit messy is part of that, and that's okay. And linked to that is, you know, not forgetting, as with you know, the connections between physical and mental and emotional well-being. And lots and lots, well, all of us, especially at the moment, you know, our lives kind of are pretty tightly constrained by a series of boxes. We live in the box of our house, children get put in the box of a car, in a car seat, they go to school, they're in the box of school. And one of the many marvelous things about being outdoors and being in nature is that outdoors is really wonky and has wobbly bits and bumpy bits and unpredictable bits. And children have to learn to physically and mentally and emotionally navigate those wobbly, bumpy bits. Sometimes, you know, again, not doing anything particularly technical or advanced. This is a local school to the Eden Project that we've done some work with in Lostwithiel, where you can see they're having a right old rare time of it, getting lagged in mud and making a terrible mess of the bank. I'm sure the grounds person was horrified. But there's also something in this about risk and opportunities for children to learn about and manage risk, which, like connection to nature, is best done as young as possible in the company of a trusted adult. It's a much better option than kind of waiting until children get to adolescence and learning about risk from first principles without having had any practice of managing risk themselves. And then, of course, nature is full of wonderful free stuff to use, loose parts in the play workers jargon. And in terms of opportunities for play, the more loose parts, stuff that children can manipulate and move, and which offers a kind of creative interpretation in its use, is the more loose parts, the more profound the play experience. And it offers, you know, it's a very different kind of engagement and interaction to, say, playing on a piece of fixed play equipment in a park, which kind of defines how you play and what you can do with it. And goodness knows we are going to need a generation of young people who are so creative and innovative to help us get out of some of the pickles we've got our way into, and that this is one of the ways that they can learn to imagine and create. This was a glorious beach day. It was October this day and we were all absolutely boiling, and the resource that we took was some Ken and Barbies from the charity shop. And the children built their dens.
Sorry to interrupt, Sam, just to let you know you got one minute.
Cool. So yeah, and there's something in there about scale as well. You know, if going to the woods and building a full-size den is a bit much, it's a lot of work, then actually shrinking down and working small is a way that we can find lots of ways for children and young people to engage with the outdoors without having to, you know, up our bushcraft game to the max. So yeah, that's it really. I just wanted to say one more thing. I was talking to a group of primary school children, young primary school children in Wales about the rainforest, and they said, "Oh, Sam, can we grow any rainforest plants at home?" And I was like, well, yes, here is one. This is a tropical rainforest plant. And it absolutely blew their minds. All the years I've been talking to children about the rainforest, that kind of one idea got the most kind of gobsmacked reaction. So don't forget about opportunities to bring nature indoors and take care of it at home as well, because, you know, they're easily come by. So look forward to chatting to some of you later. Thanks so much for your time, everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sam. It's really inspiring to hear about the work that you do. And I think some of the messages really resonate with things that we've talked about throughout this series about the importance of accessing nature, you know, where you are and in different ways. And I love the kind of playful element. And like you say, whether you have kids or not. And I think even a lot of the activities that you shared, you would want to do yourself, you know, without kids. So we're all big kids at heart, of course.
Well, I did have a very nice time making my my colour palette this afternoon.
So yeah, just a reminder, to any questions for Sam or any of the speakers, we put them in the chat box with a capital Q or the word question in front of them, and our team will be keeping an eye on those. And we'll run through them in the Q&A section later on this evening. But now I'm going to introduce our final speaker of the evening, and that is Jolie. So, Jolie Goodman is an artist who has worked from a survivor perspective in the mental health sector for over 2 decades. She's Programmes Manager for Empowerment and Later Life at the Mental Health Foundation, which is a national UK charity, and she oversees work in peer support and self-management and co-produces this work. So it really best meets the needs of the different and diverse communities that she works with. And she's currently also leading on an ambitious piece of partnership work with the Willowfowl and Wetlands Trust, which is called the Blue Prescription.
Wildfowl.
Oh, sorry, Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust, which is called the Blue Prescriptions Project. But I'll hand over to you, Jolie, because I'm sure you'll do your work much better justice. So looking forward to hearing from you.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to start by sharing my screen, so just give me a second. So this is, I try not to have slides, but for this piece of work, I've gone for slides. I just want to say thank you to the Network for Wellbeing for asking me to speak tonight. It's a real pleasure to be here. And had lots of things that really resonate with me already from the 2 other speakers. So I'm going to sort of talk about nature and mental health and the work that I'm involved in at the Mental Health Foundation. So I thought I'd start a little bit personally. As Flo said, I am an artist. At the moment, I'm making a daily digital drawing. I'm kind of recording the last year, and I think we're very much you know, all of us are so impacted by the times we live in, i.e. the COVID pandemic. And I think there's something about how we're in the pandemic at the moment and what we've been through already, but also that we're going to be emerging from the pandemic over the next few months. And I think I live in London. I've got older children. I haven't spent so much time in parks for a lot of years, but you know, in these times of turmoil, I guess being outside in nature has brought me a lot of personal solace. And it's, if I can get out first thing in the morning, it kind of makes my day. And if I don't, I really notice the difference. And this is a place called Greendale over a railway line. And actually discovered a wood that I didn't know about behind an adventure playground during lockdown, which has also been a real pleasure. And watching the seasons change has been very important. I thought, and I'll speak next a little bit about the Mental Health Foundation. So we talk about mental health in the sense that we all have a mental and physical health. And kind of the vision of the foundation is to think about good mental health for all. We want to help people to understand, protect and sustain their mental health. We're the only UK-wide mental health charity that takes a public mental health approach. And this is focused on prevention, and as well as kind of evidence-based practice and researching the kind of the interventions that we take part in. I sit in the programs department, and actually I'm coming up for exactly a year tomorrow of being based at home rather than in the London Bridge office. Our programs work is all about preventing mental ill health across the whole life course. I've got a sort of specialism in later life mental health and adults, and kind of empowering people to look after their own mental health is very important to what I do, as I'm somebody who uses mental health services. So I really bring a survivor perspective to that work, and kind of following on from that, as Flo has mentioned, I think peer support runs through our programs. And research has found that giving and receiving support is really good for all our mental health and well-being. So I want to talk particularly about two pieces of work that we've been involved in, or I've particularly been involved in the foundation. The first one is a book where we partnered with the Worldwide Wildlife Fund called Thriving in Nature. So, and also just, you know, at the time when we're very aware of the impact on climate change, this book is really a chance for people to think about how they can spend time in nature, but also, as Sam's already mentioned, the idea of people getting much more actively involved in nature, and perhaps seeing opportunities to get involved in things to do with nature for their mental health and well-being, but also for the good of nature as well. We know that across many studies, researchers have found a fascinating link between access to green space, such as fields, forests, parks and gardens, and a reduced risk of mental health problems, improved mood and increased life satisfaction. There are other benefits like reduced stress, increased physical activity, and actually benefits to your physical health. I mean, the Thriving in Nature book, you'll get a link to it, it's available on the Mental Health Foundation website. And it gives people ideas, things to do in nature across the 4 seasons of the year. There's a quote from somebody which I quite like. It's a Mental Health Foundation supporter with a dog. Nature's the best way for me to relax and get back in touch with my inner self, who tends to be calmer in dealing with life. Walking in the woods or by the sea, simply listening to nature's soundtrack while watching my 4-legged friend play always helps me and puts me in a better frame of mind. Okay, the second piece of work is called Blue Prescriptions. And I'm really excited about this project because it's finally got going. I've been working in partnership with the Wildfowl Wetlands Trust. We've been looking at lots of different funding sources for about 18 months. And we've just got a part of a grant in the government's Green Recovery Challenge Fund for its wetland creation project, enhancing climate resilience on the Somerset coast. So the work will be in the Sturt Marshes, and it will kind of build on a pilot project that happens in Slimbridge, which is kind of the headquarters of the Wildfowl Wetlands Trust, where they brought people into the site a year and a half ago to do nature-based activities, and people who took part in that experienced poor mental health. So the project that we're going to be running in Somerset, but we're also hoping will happen in the Hammersmith wetlands as well, is it's a combination of what we hope will be face-to-face activities, though initially this may actually have to happen virtually as well. And the Mental Health Foundation's self-management course, which is again a 6-week program where we're really looking for people to think about how they manage their mental health and well-being as the experts in their own mental health. Obviously, this is an image of somebody feeding birds, and they get up to really amazing things on the course. So it's bird watching, but it actually in Slimbridge people could go kayaking as well. So it was a really, really fun experience. And I think we'll be looking very much at kind of playful activities to make people, the idea is to have fun and experience nature a little bit differently. And the other thing that's really important to the work that I lead at the Mental Health Foundation is kind of that we meet the needs of people who are accessing courses. So I don't know if people know about co-producing work, but when we do the self-management course, we'll be bringing people from the Steart Marshes community who volunteer and who may work there, or also take part in other activities to help us take a course which has been done with a range of people, so people, young single parents, people in prisons, into something that will work in nature. And it's kind of, so it's something we'll be going into nature from the course, and other bits will be thinking about how you might access nature if you struggle to get outside, because that feels very important. This is a piece of work that happened before the pandemic. It's a project called Standing Together. But I think this slide has a real relevance. So obviously it's about being outdoors and working outside with people. I think the transition for a lot of people of all ages is going to be very, very tricky out of the pandemic. And I chose this image because one of the people in this group hadn't actually been outside this extra care scheme for over a year. And I think it mirrors nicely kind of the reality for people of emerging from lockdown. For some people, it will be a pleasure, and for other people, it's filled with trepidation. Bringing the outside inside. I think it's, this is my living room. So I think I feel very lucky to be able to get outside, but we know that it's very complicated. Sometimes I use a metaphor of a front door, because if you're feeling in very poor mental health, it's very hard to get outside your front door. It's very hard to leave your house, very relevant for the leaving your home when you've been in your house for a long time in the pandemic. But also I think it's really important that we think creatively about how we can bring the outside inside. So this is where I've got some plants, and the biggest plant was quite scary. So I thought, how can I say this simply? It belongs to my neighbour who hasn't been living in her house for much over the lockdown. She's here occasionally, but not. She's in her 90s. Her husband died about 20 years ago, but he gave her that succulent plant in the middle, and she said, "Oh, will you look after it for us?" And it felt like a real responsibility. But it's really borne fruit. So we've got a lot of little succulents. Here's one now. So even though it was something that was I was a bit nervous because we hadn't been very good in our house with houseplants previously. It has been a real pleasure. And there is also evidence that for people in prisons and for people in care homes, having a houseplant in your room or something to look after has a real positive impact on your mental health and well-being.
Just to let you know, you've got 1 minute to go.
Okay, right, okay, well, so what I didn't mention in the beginning is one thing the Mental Health Foundation is well known for is Mental Health Awareness Week. And the theme this year is nature. So the key messages are, are very much things that we're talking about tonight. So being around nature is good for our mental health. By connecting with nature, we can help prevent mental health problems. And everybody should have access to nature to achieve good mental health for all. This slide's a bit more wordy, but it gives you a little bit of a history. But I've just got the last section. The theme of nature was chosen this year to grow awareness of the positive impact the natural world can have on all our mental health, and how this has been particularly relevant during the COVID pandemic, with people all over the UK turning to nature as an effective way to improve their mental health and prevent problems. And we're also in the process of producing a digital toolkit for stakeholders to be able to support Mental Health Awareness Week. And details will be sent out in the information, but you can email our press department to get put on a register and receive this pack hopefully about mid-April. And this is one of the only visual we've got so far for Mental Health Awareness Week. So it's the 10th to the 16th of May. Sorry, I thought I had rather a lot to say, so I hope that made sense, but please ask me questions if I went a bit too fast.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jolie. It's really wonderful to hear about your work, and also so brilliant that Mental Health Awareness Week is focused on this theme this year. It's, like you say, it's so such good timing and such relevance at this time, with it being so relevant for people's mental health during COVID times and lockdown. So yeah, we've had 3 wonderful presentations there. Any questions for Jolie, please do put them in the chat box with a Q or a question in front, and we're going to have a question and answer session with all 3 of our speakers shortly. But what we're going to do first actually is just go into smaller breakout rooms, just so that you can have a chance to connect with other participants on this event. And just to let you know that the breakout rooms won't be recorded at all. So we really invite you to use this as an opportunity to connect with each other. So if possible, turning your cameras on and saying hello. It's completely optional. So if you'd prefer not to go into a breakout room, there'll be a pop-up box in a moment, and you can just select to stay in the main room and wait for the Q&A. But we'll be in breakout rooms for about 10 minutes or so, perhaps just under. And the invitation in the breakout rooms is just to introduce yourself, perhaps your connection to the topic of the event this evening, and also just reflect on what's been shared from the speakers this evening. Has anything particularly stuck with you, or is there anything perhaps that you'd like to ask more about, that you're hoping to hear more about in the Q&A section? So yeah, just a chance, broadly, no specific, but more just a chance to connect with each other and have a chat, really. So hopefully that's clear. I'll just check in with my colleague Jana to see, yeah, you're ready to set up the breakout room. So yeah, please do come back afterwards, because we'll have an opportunity for the question and answer with the speakers and for sharing. Welcome back, everyone. Breakout rooms are funny things, because you suddenly go into another space and get the chance to connect, and it feels like you're sometimes dragged out of them a bit too soon, or you make new connections. So what we're actually going to do now, as you arrive back from that breakout room experience, is just offer you guys a way to hopefully connect with each other a little bit more, and kind of share your own work and your own details, because welcome back those just joining. As I was saying, it can feel strange to make those new fresh connections and then be jolted back. But what we're going to do now, just briefly before going into the question and answer session with the speakers, I'm just going to share a link in the I'm going to share a link in a moment to a Google document, which is actually a contacts list, which is encouraging you all to stay in touch with each other. So this is one of those things that will also be shared in the follow-up email. So if you are not on a device or not in a space where you can kind of click on that link and access it now, no worries. But if you are, I'm just going to explain it very briefly, and you can either do this now or when you receive it in the follow-up email. In that Google document contact list, if you click on the link in the chat box now, you'll open it up and you'll see a list of names, essentially, and it's only first names. These are the first names of people that have signed up for this event this evening. And this is an optional invitation. If you would like to share any of your details in this list, you are more than welcome to, in terms of your email address, your website link, if you're working in this kind of area, any kind of other things you'd like to share. You'll see the sections in the document. So like I say, that's a completely optional invitation, but we just love to include that as an opportunity for you to stay connected with each other. And if you've been to event 1 or 2 of this series and you're thinking, hold on, I did that last time and where are my details gone, if you scan right down to like line 195, you'll see we've moved down the previous names of people and details that have been entered. Once we've kind of completed the series, we're going to put this all together in a nice list, but we moved down the previous entries so that it didn't get confusing this evening. So if that's hopefully that's making sense to some people. Alison, you're saying if you're not on the list, feel free to add yourself just right at the bottom. As long as you add your details in there, then they'll be included. So if you're enthusiastic and able to add your details now, wonderful. If you'd like to but can't now, don't panic, because it will be included in the follow-up. And yeah, that's available for the rest of this event and from now. So what we're going to do now is move on to the question and answer with our panel of speakers. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague Tracy from Eden Project Communities, who's going to be asking the questions of the speakers. So over to you, Tracy.
Thank you very much, Flo, and I'm quite excited. I'm having to pay attention to the questions everybody else is asking because I've like got a list myself, so I don't think we'll run dry. But that's fascinating, and I was chatting to someone in the breakout rooms and was saying how really nice it was to hear and listen to so many like-minded people, and there's a real sense of being uplifted that you'd found that common ground and a bit of a clan that you don't have to explain yourself to. So that was joyous. So I'm going to start with my first question for you, Claire. So Varela has asked, how do you stay present and mindful if you're not immersed in the natural environment? And do you have any tips or practices that could help others?
Sure. So I'm guessing you mean sort of if you're more confined to the indoors. Yeah, so I guess like I said in my talk at the beginning, you know, even when we're indoors, we still have you know, we still have the body, we still have the breath, we still have all the natural processes that are happening in the body. So even if you're just going through a sort of you know, very simple guided mindfulness practice that will take you into your experience of those things, that can be a way to connect with nature. Just sort of breathing in and out. It might be just as simple as that, but just really tuning into that experience and I guess the kind of naturalness of that experience and the fact that it just has like a natural rhythm to it, and that can be a very simple way. I think anything that's a grounding practice, so even just feeling the, you know, like feeling gravity underneath the body, feeling supported by gravity is a way to connect to just the earth, even if it's, you know, in your room. Yeah, those are a few ideas. Visualizations, you know, they're guided visualizations of being in nature. Yeah, like
they're lovely. Thank you. And just to follow on, Molly has asked, in which ways do you access nature on a regular basis that help your sense of well-being?
So I guess, well, recently in the lockdown, it's been sort of daily walks
for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. But just sort of, I guess I've been trying to get out at least in the morning and in the evening when we've been allowed. And just paying attention to your senses whilst you're walking, noticing, you know, maybe looking through a different lens, like noticing colors, noticing shapes, movement, if you're going through sight. Obviously, like paying attention to sounds, like quality of the air, temperature of the air, things like that. There's one particular practice that's really that people have been practicing in lockdown, I know, which is the sit spot, which goes back to John Young's work again. And it's very simple. It's just, you can just do it in your garden if you have one, or on a local park bench, and just go sit to the same spot possibly every day or as regularly as possible, and just developing a kind of like a personal relationship with a place. And it's just about going through your experience of your different senses in that space, getting to know the wildlife that comes to visit that space, noticing how it changes over time. But if you look up sit spot, then you'll find guidance on how to go about it.
That's really funny because Shuna, who I was in a room with, that's exactly what she was doing every day before she took. She talked about six spotting, so that's lovely. Thank you. A couple of questions for you, Sam. Geeta asked, are there any sort of specific exercises for children listed on the Eden Project website?
Yes, there are, and there's kind of two different places to look for stuff on the Eden website for children. So there are things written as resources for schools, which are more kind of curriculum and learning focused, and then the Learn at Home section has got lots of kind of more family and home focused activities that we particularly kind of focused on. So that's on the Eden Project website, and then the Eden Project Communities website. I'll dig out the link because it's buried quite deep, but there's some really lovely activities developed as part of the I Will for Nature campaign, which are kind of start here kind of thing. Oh, we've got tech support, haven't we? They know where that stuff is. How marvelous. So yeah, there's plenty there, but it's a bit weirdly smeared around the place.
Mm-hmm. And how do you feel it's easiest to help engage adults in play or to encourage imagination and playfulness?
I think the thing that I said about the power of stories and yarns and tales, you know, we call them kind of hooks for learning, but hooks for engagement as well. And you know, we've run sessions for families where we were entering a particular kingdom where no technical gizmos were required, and we made all the grown-ups put their phones in a dry bag and took them away before we started. And so, you know, I kind of feel like a lot of people want to play, but they feel silly and they need permission. So I think really carefully about how you sort of create a context where people feel like they have permission, and that's kind of all of the things that, you know, if you're a facilitator, you'll know about comfortable spaces and authenticity, and you know, being kind of really clear with people about what you're getting them into.
I think that scene setting, storytelling and permission's really, really important. And I remember when me and my team down at Eden went in search of the golden underpants, ladies and gentlemen. And that was fabulous, great imaginary superpowers and everything. But we just all got into it because we felt safe that we could, and actually we had permission to do so. And just the last one, Sam, and I don't know if you can answer this. This is from Kerry. How do you measure nature connectedness of individuals at the Eden Project? Is there a certain measure that we use?
So there is a measure. It's not one that we use at the Eden Project, and somebody has put in the chat, I think. So, and actually this kind of, you know, the idea of kind of measuring and reporting on nature connectedness, actually Eden's mission to do nature connectedness sort of predates the sort of the research base almost. So I think we're not particularly strong at the Eden Project on doing that research and evidence gathering. But once again, I direct you to the excellent work of Miles Richardson's team at the University of Derby, who are all over this stuff.
Okay, thank you very much. And a question for Jolie. There's two actually. One which was how do you get in touch with, how do you get involved in Mental Health Week? But also, is there a place that you would recommend that people can access and learn about the science behind access to nature or for mental health?
I couldn't quite hear the first one you said.
The first one was basically how do you get involved in Mental Health Week? Okay.
And I think the best place to start really is the Mental Health Foundation website. Probably about mid-April, things will start being put on that website. And I think also social media is particularly good for the Mental Health Foundation. So they're on at Mental Health on Twitter and on Instagram and on Facebook. and kind of that will also give people a kind of sense of the different things that we do at the foundation. Be a lot in the public domain. I think I'm very aware of it anyway, but there's a lot in the public domain and on news items. I think interwoven with the pandemic, kind of about spring, counting the birds in your garden. So I think it feels like the theme for Mental Health Awareness Week is particularly pertinent this year. And the idea about how you find more about science, I guess it's things like the book Thriving in Nature. Kind of, it's more about, I guess, what we do as an organization. We look at different types of research. So there'll be a new lot of research around Mental Health Awareness Week this year as well. So it's kind of, I guess it's talking about the academic really, and looking about what we know and what people report, and seeing how that's gathered together. So things like we are for Mental Health Awareness Week, we're doing kind of a literature review. We'll look about like across the life course and other ways about that. So we always produce a kind of as well for mental health awareness.
Thank you.
Question.
Yeah, I think you did. And this one's for everyone, so you might as well answer it first. How do we help people to see that nature exists everywhere and not just in places like Eden Project and nature reserves? And I think if you do have the recording, some of that was in our last session, but it'd be really nice if our speakers could maybe reflect on that question.
Shall I start then?
Yes, if you don't mind.
I think it's a really pertinent question, and kind of we know stuff around, which you may have talked about already, about inequalities across our society, and and how mental health fits with that. But I think what say for Mental Health Awareness Week this year, we very much want to think about many more diverse communities, actually making the work that we do relevant to them. And when I'm trying to talk about bringing the outside inside, it's kind of thinking about how we can engage with nature on our own terms and ways that reflect our cultural heritage and backgrounds. And I think, to reflect what Sam's saying, kind of the stories that we are brought up with, the things that we know about our family history and our identity and our heritage and places. I have a very short story of somebody in a Standing Together group who talked about how he spent a lot of his childhood in a mango tree, and it was such a vivid, different type of experience, but it was very, it's something that stayed with me. So I think it's about, for me, it's about really celebrating diversity and really trying to engage people who might traditionally not seek out nature.
Thank you, that was lovely. Would any other of our speakers like to answer that?
I'm happy to say, so I guess sort of building on what I've already said around, the fact that nature is already within us. But I think because we haven't mentioned it a lot, I think maybe just bringing in the birds and the fact that actually, birds are a wonderful entry point into nature connection, because they're one of the sort of few animals that are easily visible, few species that are easily visible around us, and they're present in our gardens, in cities, pretty much anywhere. And even if we are noticed in the question, the chat box, about if you are confined to the indoors for whatever reason, having a bird feeder in the garden or a window feeder or whatever is a really lovely way to sort of have some connection with nature. So yeah, just thought I'd mention birds.
Yeah, no, I adore the birds, and I think we had a really nice speaker on before talking about, just the blackbird on his disco ball, I believe. But when we talk about nature, I adore the sky, and I find the sky just immense. And I think there's something about just looking up sometimes as well. And it's an underrated asset in our nature toolbox, I think. Do we have any more time for any more questions or any more reflections, Flo?
Perhaps one last question, and then we're going to go to a closing practice with Claire.
Okay. I will go with every day we are bombarded with messages saying buy this, buy that, yet nature is free for most, not always. How can we persuade people out of the shopping mall and into their gardens and into the wild. Go on, anybody. Come on, speakers, be brave.
I think it's an ideal time now because people have been haven't been in shops, and I guess people are shopping online, but people have been outside, and I think it's about keeping this conversation going about nature as we emerge from the pandemic, and thinking about how we live differently with nature post lockdown, at least. Pandemic.
And I think also just, I think getting people to reflect on their experiences of nature that they have had during the pandemic, because I think when people realize that nature does support their well-being through their own experience, then that is really what sort of draws people to spend more time in it, rather than the sort of preaching the value of it. I think just, you know, building on what people already have, and the pandemic, I think, is a really good opportunity for that.
Anybody else?
Well, I just think kind of tying those last two questions together really is about it's encouraging and enabling people to kind of spot and notice and appreciate the nature where they are, and that it isn't, you know, that there was a reason I did my sunshine bracelet kind of on the manky bit of cul-de-sac alleyway. You know, it's everywhere. And so it, you know, it's also about making that connection, that when we are talking about nature and the benefits, that as Claire has described so beautifully, those benefits can be accessed even from the tiniest bits of nature. Increasingly, you know, the research is also demonstrating that virtual nature has a role to play as well as indoor nature. So you know, it's making sure that we're describing really kind of comprehensively what we're talking about when we say go do nature.
Yeah, I always like to do outdoors. Just go do outdoors. You know, as Claire says, we are nature. It's everywhere. Just be outside. Thank you, Sam. That was lovely. Right, well, I hand back over to Flo, who will probably hand back over to Claire.
Yeah.
But honestly, I've had a really splendid time listening to you all.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tracy, and all our speakers. I agree, it's been really inspiring to hear about all of your work. So to close our sharings this evening, Claire is kindly going to offer a short practice and a poem. So yeah, we have got just under 5 minutes, Claire, so just a brief practice and a poem. Thank you so much. I'll hand over to you.
Cool. Okay, thank you, Flo. Yeah, so we'll just do a really brief guided practice, and then I'll just finish by reading a poem that some of you may be familiar with, that resonates with a lot of the session today. So if you just want to bring yourself into a comfortable position again, perhaps bring your eyes to close or drop your gaze, whatever you feel most comfortable with. And then just taking a moment just to just really allow all of the discussions that we've had to sort of settle a little bit at their own pace. Maybe just letting all the sort of words and ideas and things that we've exchanged just start to fall to the ground, maybe a little bit like snowflakes sort of falling. And then as that happens, then just starting to tune into your physical experience of your breathing. And just noticing where in your body you're currently experiencing your breathing the most. And there's no right or wrong answer, so just really being curious, bringing that playfulness to it even. Just where do I feel my breath right now? And also bringing a sense of allowing to however you do find your breathing now. So it may be that it's quite sort of rested and relaxed. It might be that it's a little shallow. And just whatever your breathing's like, just allowing it to be as it is, and yeah, just coming alongside your breathing and being curious about it. And if your mind is quite busy, then just being aware of that, remembering that that's okay too, that the mind is also part of our human experience of aliveness. So just noticing its activity, and then perhaps just letting it fade into the background of your awareness, and then maybe coming now down into the points of contact between your body and the surface beneath you. Just feeling the support of the surface beneath you, feeling held by the pull of gravity. Just noticing what that feels like. And then maybe just taking a moment just to notice how you're feeling generally right now. And again, no expectation, no pressure to be experiencing anything in particular. Just, if possible, welcoming your experience just as it is, and noticing just how it feels physically in your body. Maybe just bringing a sense of sort of kindness, compassion, understanding for yourself in terms of however you're feeling right now. Now just coming back to your physical experience of your breathing again. So that part of your body where you're noticing you're breathing the most. And I'm just going to finish by reading a poem which is called Wild Geese by Mary Oliver. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. So then in your own time, bringing some movement back into the body, bringing your eyes to open again when you're ready. And I will pass back to Flo. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire. Really beautiful experience and poem to end our time together this evening and in this series. Thank you all of the speakers again this evening, Claire, Sam, Jolie. It's been wonderful to have you and learn from you. And thank you so much everyone that's joined us this evening. And throughout the series, the Network of Wellbeing and Eden Project communities, we've loved running this series together. And this isn't the end. If you're enthusiastic to explore how to put the lessons learned throughout the speaker events in this series into practice in your own lives, in your community, work particularly, we'd love to invite you to our workshop, which is happening in 2 weeks' time on Tuesday evening. We'll send the link in the follow-up email, and perhaps one of my yeah, colleagues, thank you. Jana will put it in the chat just now. And yeah, it's just before we fully close, I'd love to take a screenshot of everyone joining this evening, just so that we can share on social media. So if you'd prefer not to be included in that, feel free to make sure your camera's off. If you're enthusiastic to be included in that, then feel free to wave or smile or do your photo pose. I love it, Lisa, you're always there waving enthusiastically, which warms my heart. Lisa's a regular webinar attendee. So thank you so much, everyone, again. And just to check in with Tracy, whether there's anything you'd like to add from your side before we close.
No, we've got the up and coming workshop. I think that's great. I love that you did the geese, Claire. I love Corinne Polwart, and she does this Remember the Geese, and it's just beautiful, beautiful song. So yeah, so that's made me feel much happier. And if I was quick enough, I'd share the music while we were leaving, but I don't think I'm quick enough. But thank you, everybody, and honestly, for all those that have participated, it's been joyous spending these last 3 sessions with you, and hopefully we'll see you next week.